I don't know. I don't remember. Good. You did well?
What'd you get? 32.
You did? Oh, high five. Awesome. Nice work.
Although I failed already. So then I just
What'd you get on writing?
like 6.
That is not failing writing.
That is it out of 12?
Generally, a score of 6 or better is considered. No, don't think of a 6 as 50%. That's the wrong way of thinking about it. That's like concluding for my Blue Book essays that a 2 is 50%. That's not what it means, right? You got a 2 out of a possible 4, so that means you got 50%. No, that's not what it means. You have to look at the finer breakdown, right? So you should think of the 6. Yeah, actually, yes, the ACT is on a curve every year. Did you know that?
What?
The ACT is based on a current curve. So your score last year was a 31. If you took the exact same test and did the exact same, achieved the exact same score, this year your score might be a 34. Same score, because it's based on a curve. But it also might be a 29 or a 28. They base it on how the entire population did, which you might argue isn't fair, but that's the way it's scored. The ACT is scored on a curve. Yeah.
Who decided that?
Them.
Not them.
You know them. Okay. Finally, we can finally start looking at historical evidence for the Spanish-American War. We are finally starting our look at the decision to go to war against Spain. I'm telling you that everything we're covering starting today is material you could potentially use as historical evidence for the paper, not the essay. Although there might be some stuff in here for the Blue Book essay, because there might be some justification for arguing that the America became an or not because of markets that were made available, or there might be some xenophobic material here. Actually, I know there is. And so I will always try and say, hey, gee, look at this. This seems like something you might consider using for whatever. Good map here that shows the American Empire. And the way we're going to define empire is as follows. And you might argue that's not the correct definition. Fine. But it's what I'm going to operate on. That if you are acquiring land with absolutely no intention of having that newly acquired land be equal to the land you already have, that's an empire, right? So westward expansion, that wasn't an empire because those things that were acquired would become states. Now you might argue, yes, it was an empire. They removed the Indians and okay, fine. That's a discussion. But just for purposes of this class, we're going to say there was no intention. They never intended on the Philippines becoming a state. That was never part of the plan. Well then, the people of the Philippines are, as a result, somehow less than American citizens. Even though they're under America's flag, they're not American citizens. That's an empire. Okay? So you can see the various acquisitions that we did. And I'm wondering if anybody in here could look and see the problem of acquiring all this stuff. Like project about 41 years into the future. Just right? It's 1898, 1899, 1900. Now go forward about 40 years. Okay, very good. Couldn't you make the argument that acquiring distant lands exposed the U.S. to foreign entanglements? That when the Japanese decide, hey, we're going to become a global power, and so we're going to start acquiring territories, that their desire, as a result of our previous desire, puts us in a position where we're the ones who have to confront Japanese territorial desires, right? They say, well, we want the Philippines. And now we're the ones who have to go defend the Philippines because they're ours. Had we never acquired the Philippines, it would have been our problem. We just said, yeah, I'm sorry, Japan, but it's not really our problem, right? There are struggles right now in the middle of Africa. There's genocide going on in what's called Darfur, which is right there. Darfur. It's very sad. But I don't see the Marines going in there. Part of the argument is, it's sad, but it's not really our problem. I wish it would stop, right? Did you know that there is parental abuse going on? Probably in Somerset. Well, why aren't I going door to door to stop it? Knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell. Excuse me, can I talk to your kids? Does your dad hit you? Yeah. And then I go beat the piss out of the dad. Why don't I do that? I mean, I'm allowing it to happen, right? I am allowing child abuse to happen in some homes, right? Well, no, I'm not allowing it to happen. It's not part of my world. I've got other things that I'm dealing with. But our desire for American empire forced the U.S. to confront when other countries became sort of aggressive. That might be an argument against American the American decision to go to war against Spain. By doing so, we acquired lands that required future military involvement to confront when other countries did the same thing. And had we simply stayed within our borders, wouldn't have led to American deaths in future wars. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What's the obvious counter argument? What? Okay, something like that. Very good.
If like Japan or whatever, like if they acquired those areas, then they'd just be that much closer than it to us.
Very good, right? You're suggesting that American military involvement later on is somehow bad. I mean, you could make this argument good that the U.S. was forced to confront Japanese aggressive behavior and, to a certain extent, the Germans. We had a dispute with the Germans here. Good. That made the world a better place. American military involvement later on made the world a better place. Could be the obvious response here. Just a couple other things to note here. It's all about China, right? China's got 1 billion people. That's 1 billion consumers. But American boats can't get all the way across the Pacific Ocean. It's too long. The fuel supply simply does not allow for boats to travel that far. So you got to have You have to have, in essence, refueling stations, right? So they can fill up the tank and keep going, right? So think of Hawaii as a great big gas station. Think of Guam as a great big gas station. Again, this is sort of interesting because this fits in so nicely with World War II because, any of you ever heard of what's called island hopping?
Mm-hmm.
The American strategy to fight the Japanese involved island hopping. All these islands, many of them, I mean, the extent of the Japanese empire was basically about like that, just like that.
They wanted the whole thing.
Right? Does the United States have to recapture all of those islands? There's thousands of them. Do we have to recapture all of them? And the conclusion was, no, we don't have to recapture all these islands. We just need to bomb Japan. But again, planes can't fly that far. So just capture the right ones, right? Get back Hawaii, get back Guam. You can fly to Japan from Guam. Okay, so we just need to get Guam and maybe an island before Guam. So there's no need to recapture it. We've met Mr. Mahan before. He's in your documents. He wrote this book, which made this argument. Here's the basic argument. Does the U.S. want to become a global power? Is that who we want to be? If so, you need a Navy. you have to have a Navy. I mean, look at the world. It's 70% covered in water. That means Navy. So build up your Navy. You build up your Navy to protect your fleet that carries goods, right? You want to get to China? You need boats to get to China, boats that carry products, all right? The boats that carry American products to China. Well, they can't get there, so you got to refuel. So you need gas stations, in essence, gas stations. Well, you got to protect those gas stations. You have to militarily protect those gas stations, which means Navy. You have to have a Navy. And one of the people that read his book was a guy by the name of Teddy Roosevelt, who eventually became president. And as president, he authorized the modernization of the American Navy. They called it the Great White Fleet. They painted all the boats white. That's true. They painted the boats white in support of Mahan's argument. Okay. The Spanish-American War, just one last thing to note here. The Spanish-American War would be the U.S. afterwards acquiring Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Well, Cuba and Puerto Rico are on this side of the land, and the Philippines is on this side, right? There's land in the way. You want a Navy? Either you build two navies, one for this side and one for this side, or I suppose you could sail around South America, which would take a really long time. Very good. Or you build a water bridge. And so that's why Panama becomes part of this story, right? The U.S. wants an empire. You gotta be able to defend the empire with your Navy. Well, Panama's nice and thin. Let's build a canal through Panama. So that's part of this little story. Okay. The reason Nicaragua is also colored is because there was also a suggestion to build a canal through Nicaragua. And you might think, well, that's stupid, but Nicaragua has huge lakes. So it was actually fairly feasible.
So if we had all those islands, how did the Japanese sneak up on Hawaii?
Stay tuned.
Okay.
Right? That's a really good question. Right? How did they do that? Great question. Okay. Here we go. We are now looking at something that I would suggest that those of you writing the xenophobic essay, the one about nativists, could use. You could also use this in your paper, the idea of social Darwinism. It was a real thing. You take the ideas of evolution and you apply it to nations, businesses, races. Okay, so a lovely picture that was made at the time. Look at the noble white person surrounded by all of the inferior races, whether they're the Asian or the Native American or the African inferior peoples that are all going to rape our white women unless we protect them. Put a shield around the noble white woman. The inferior races. Here's another one, another political cartoon at the time. This is a visual representation of what was called the white man's burden. This was, again, a belief at the time. Later on, Hitler would say the same thing. The superiority of the Aryan. It's the same thing the KKK says. The superiority of the white man. It's all the same basic argument. We white people are superior. We are superior because we have a superior religion. We are superior because we have a superior political system, democracy. We are superior because we have a superior economic system, capitalism, right? We're better than you and we know it. We're like global Joe. And the others are regular guy, what's it called? Average Joes, right? Average Joes. Globo Joe. I read it in a book. Just kidding, but I did. Let's look at this political cartoon. Let's see. We have some guy, right? And he's strong, right? And what's that thing he's carrying? He's carrying something. What? A plant? It's a guess.
A person?
That is, well, kind of.
An Indian.
Yeah, it is a person, kind of. He's clearly a person of inferior. That's an arm. He's carrying Dirkus. Oh, Dirkus.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is an African, a savage. This is a savage. You might have found him in the jungles of Africa or out west, U.S. Right? He doesn't have education. He is unable to climb without the help of the white guy. Right? To a schoolhouse. You see, inferior person, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you. Hey, people of the Philippines, we're here to help you. We're here to educate you about the blessings of democracy and capitalism and Christianity. We're here to help you. Anyone want to take a guess? Who is that guy? Do any of you reckon it? Very good. That's Teddy Roosevelt. Right? You see that his water sack says U.S. Did any of you see the shoes?
I thought those were rocks.
Implying violence ahead, but it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it.
What does shoes have to do with it? They're laying on the ground.
Dead guy.
Oh, God, okay.
Dead guy.
guy.
Like, laying in the woods.
Shoes.
Yes, sir.
That is elephant. Isn't that the guy that
What is
likes to hunt and all that?
Yeah. Yeah. He led an interesting life. Yeah.
Are those his lips?
Yeah. The big-lipped, right? The stereotypic big-lipped African. Savage.
It takes like half.
I mean, look at the way he's
his
dressing.
face,
He's
though.
wearing leaves as clothing. Come on. Wear clothes, damn it. This is a justification for American empire, that we're here to help. We are different from the British. Think about the British approach to empire. Mercantilism. We're the spider sucking the blood of the flies that land in our web. We're the opposite. We're not here to take. We're here to give. Give you capitalism. Give you democracy. Give you culture. Give you religion. We're giving people. And I don't mean that sarcastically. It's truly the belief of the people. Now, Hitler would go in another direction. Hitler would be, we're superior, so our job is to eliminate the inferior. Whereas the American approach was, no, let's bring these people up. Now, was it arrogant? Was it misguided? You could make that argument. Absolutely.
So
How arrogant we were.
Hitler pushed the people down
Yeah, push the people down the hill. Why bother educating them? It's pointless. Eliminate them. Wipe them out. So Hitler took it to another level. Okay, very good. The White Man's Burden, by the way, is a poem by Kipling, I believe. I think it's called The White Man's Burden. Look it up. It's eloquent and it's beautiful, but when you really read what it's saying, you're like, wow, pretty full of yourself, white people.
How do you run for president? 2020?
Am I running for president?
Well, you're gonna lose against Kanye.
I'll lose against Kanye, right? Okay. Let's keep going here. So this is the drawing. This is the real thing. This is an actual church built in Hawaii. It's still there. When the Americans took Hawaii, one of the first thing they did, the people that moved there, was built a church to Christianize the people who, there's no way they would have heard the gospel. How could Jesus have reached the people in Hawaii? Right? So it's our job to spread the gospel truths to the poor people of Hawaii. Over here, this is if it weren't so sad, it would be amusing drawing of what happened in Hawaii. I don't know. Anybody know who that is? She's the queen of Hawaii. That's exactly right. Queen Liliuokalani. That was her name, Liliuokalani. And again, you can see the stereotypic big-lipped, almost monkey-looking depiction of the queen. And she's the ruler of Hawaii. At least she was the ruler of Hawaii until Americans showed up. American sugar plantations were set up. They overthrew the queen and then immediately asked to be annexed. And pretty soon American soldiers show up and Hawaii was a territory. Fun little fact. Let's try this. Excuse me. Hello? Am I Hawaii? Yeah. Cheers. Bye. Go to the office between classes. Okay. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. Fun little test question. True or false, Cindy? True or false? The United States was attacked at Pearl Harbor.
I want to say true, but I think it's false.
Is he right?
Yeah.
He is right. The United States was not attacked at Pearl Harbor. Hawaii was not a state. America was attacked at Pearl Harbor. True. United States is the 50 states. There's this other thing called America. You know what it is? That. That is America.
America.
Truck, yeah.
This is the United States. This is America. And there were people that said, this should be America.
Wow.
Oh, right. Anyway, I'm telling you how did the United States acquire Hawaii? There was a coup that overthrew the queen by American sugar plantation owners and workers. And then the U.S. stepped in and said, we got it. Right? It was sort of a two-step process. And Hawaii did not become a state until, I think it's 1959, actually. 59. It's 50th state. It is the 15th state.
Well, the 6th of November.
It was a territory when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. It was not a state. Okay. Any questions here?
No.
Last slide that we're looking at. This is it. So Japan is the story here. So again, this fits in nicely. The U.S. wants access to foreign markets. Japan is a fairly xenophobic nation. Anyone know what that means?
They hate everyone except for themselves.
Very good. Fear foreigners, right? Japan, this is one of these interesting little facts. Japan today is one of the most Japanese nations on earth. And you might think, well, of course it is. Everyone in Japan is Japanese. But I mean that. Everyone in Japan is Japanese. What I've just done is I've identified two different ways to label Japan. There's Japan the nation, and then there's Japan the culture, the race. Everyone in Japan is Japanese. Everyone in America is not American. Even though everyone in America is American, everyone in America is not American. I'm using American two different ways. The race and the nationality. We're all Americans. Now, raise your hand if you're 100% American. Nobody, right? Some of us are Irish and German and Polish, whatever. That's your ethnic background. Everyone in Japan has a Japanese ethnic background. Nobody immigrates to Japan, right? Our Statue of Liberty tells a very different story than Japanese history. Immigrants, the poor and destitute of Europe, didn't say, now let's get on the boat and go to Tokyo. No. They said, let's go to New York. They did not go to Japan. It's just a different history. In the history of Japan, there's been exactly one nation that has ever had soldiers set foot on it against the will of the Japanese.
US.
USA. Way to go. And it all starts with this guy. That's an American. His name is Perry. His grandfather, I believe his grandfather was the American who defeated the British in the War of 1812, Battle of Lake Erie. So naval power runs strong in his family. He shows up in Japan one day, 1853, there it is, 1853. So remember, the Civil War is still 7 years away. Lincoln is not president yet. So this story, we're kind of going back a bit. He shows up in Japan, 1853, and he shows up with a couple naval vessels with these things called cannons. The Japanese were still in that mode of samurai, right? Big swords. Gunpowder was used by the Japanese to launch pretty fireworks, right? No one in Japan ever thought, if you make a round cylindrical piece of metal and you put a piece of metal inside of it and you put gunpowder here and made it explode, that piece of metal will go real fast and you can kill people. That never occurred to the Japanese. They said, pretty. It took Europeans to say, kill, right? So he has cannons and the Japanese have swords. And he basically said to the Japanese shogun warrior, the ruler of Japan was not a unified country at that time. There was a bunch of little things, but there were a couple big time people. And he basically said to the Japanese, I'm coming back in 1 year. In 1 year, I will not have 3 boats. I'll have many more than 3 boats with these big cannons. And if you do not open up Japanese ports to American exports, we'll use those cannons. And left. 1 year later, the American Navy showed up. Japan opened up her ports to American commerce.
How nice is that?
But wait, this is where the story gets interesting. So the Japanese become students. Oh, that's how you become a player. You build a big navy, then you invade foreign countries and force them. 100-ish years later, the Japanese would do exactly the same thing to China. And Korea and Vietnam and all those islands. I am not blaming Japanese behavior before and during World War II on the U.S. I'm saying they took a page out of our history book, just like Hitler sort of took a page out of our history. Oh, that's what you do. Oh, right. Okay. The treaty that they signed is this Treaty of Kagawa. Okay. Very good. Wow, that took a while. I am sorry. But the good news is, I think now you can really start looking at your paper and say, here's an example that I could use here. Here's an example that I could use here. And your 4-paragraph mini thing is due a week from today. I'm not really going to read it, but at least you should be able to start piecing this paper together with pieces of history and good quotes and really putting together a nice little 4-paragraph mini paper that's due next week. Any questions? You do have about 10-ish minutes of nothing if you want to use it.
I have a question. What does it take to be 100% American?
Oh, no, the opposite.
American meaning Native American.
Okay.
It's just not a thing. I mean, it's amazingly rare if that person still exists.
Cool.
Okie dokie. Don't forget, there are Kia due tomorrow.